She was alone in the forest, freezing, in labor, and terrified until a stranger appeared. But what happened next wasn't just a rescue. It was the beginning of something that would change all three of their lives. Thank you so much for watching, and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked this story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The cold Montana wind howled through the ancient pines as Sarah Miller clutched her swollen belly and stumbled deeper into the forest. At 26, she never imagined she would be giving birth alone in the wilderness, miles from civilization. 6 months ago, she had a stable job as a nurse in Seattle, a small apartment, and dreams of starting a family someday with the right person. Then came Thomas. Charming, handsome Thomas, who swept her off her feet with promises of love and commitment. When she discovered she was pregnant, his true colors emerged. The verbal abuse escalated to physical threats, and when she refused to terminate the pregnancy, he abandoned her entirely. "Just keep moving," Sarah whispered to herself, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. She had fled Seattle 3 days ago after discovering Thomas had been tracking her movements. With only her car, a small bag of essentials, and what remained of her savings, she headed east with no destination in mind. Her contractions were coming closer now, about 15 minutes apart. The pain radiated through her lower back and wrapped around her abdomen like a vice. Sarah had assisted with enough births to know she didn't have much time. "I need to find shelter," she murmured, scanning the darkening forest. The late October sky threatened snow, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. Her medical training told her this situation was becoming increasingly dangerous for both her and her baby. A particularly strong contraction brought Sarah to her knees. She cried out, the sound echoing through the empty forest. Her car had broken down on a remote country road hours ago, and she had wandered into the woods hoping to find a cabin or some form of shelter. As the contraction subsided, Sarah spotted what appeared to be a small hunter's cabin about 50 yards ahead. Hope surged through her as she struggled to her feet and moved toward it as quickly as her condition allowed. The cabin was abandoned but intact. The door creaked open to reveal a simple one-room structure with a small wood stove, a rickety table, and a narrow cot covered in dust. It wasn't much, but it would provide shelter from the elements. "Thank you," she breathed, not sure who she was thanking, but feeling grateful nonetheless. Sarah closed the door behind her and immediately began preparing for what was to come. She stripped the dusty blanket from the cot and replaced it with the clean emergency blanket from her bag. She arranged her limited medical supplies, alcohol wipes, a small first aid kit, a pocket knife she had sterilized with a lighter on the table. The contractions were 10 minutes apart now. Sarah knew she had perhaps an hour, maybe less, before she would need to push. She tried not to think about the complications that could arise, about the risks of giving birth alone, without proper medical equipment or assistance. Instead, she focused on her breathing, on preparing mentally for what lay ahead. "We're going to be okay," she whispered to her unborn child, rubbing her belly gently. "I promise I'll keep you safe." As darkness fell completely, the first snowflakes began to drift past the cabin's small, dirty window. Sarah lit the single candle she had in her bag, its flickering light casting long shadows on the cabin walls. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the cracks in the cabin's weathered planks. When her water broke an hour later, Sarah felt a moment of pure terror. This was really happening. She was really going to give birth alone in an abandoned cabin in the middle of nowhere. She thought about her mother, who had passed away 2 years ago from cancer. How she wished her mother could be here now, holding her hand, telling her everything would be all right. "I can do this," she said aloud, her voice stronger than she felt. "I've helped bring dozens of babies into this world. I can do this." The labor progressed quickly after that. The contractions came in waves, each one more intense than the last. Sarah lost track of time as she focused entirely on the rhythmic process of labor. Push, breathe, rest, push again. And then, just as the first light of dawn began to creep through the cabin window, Sarah gave one final tremendous push, and her baby entered the world with a strong, healthy cry. "Oh my God," Sarah sobbed, lifting the tiny, wet infant to her chest. "Hello, my beautiful girl." "Hello, Emma." Emma's cries filled the small cabin as Sarah cleaned her with trembling hands, cut and tied the umbilical cord, and wrapped her in the cleanest piece of clothing. She had a soft cotton shirt she had packed in her bag. The euphoria of meeting her daughter was soon tempered by the reality of their situation. Sarah was exhausted, weakened from the birth. The cabin offered minimal protection from the cold, and the snow was falling more heavily now. They couldn't stay here long, but Sarah had no idea how they would leave or where they would go. As Emma nursed for the first time, Sarah gazed down at her daughter's perfect face and made a silent promise. Somehow she would find a way to give this child the life she deserved. Somehow they would survive this. Outside, unbeknownst to Sarah, a weathered pickup truck was making its way along a nearby service road, the driver unaware that his morning route would soon change the course of 3 lives forever. Jack Harmon had lived on the same 200-acre ranch in Montana for all of his 42 years. The property had been in his family for 3 generations, and after his wife Lisa died of cancer 5 years ago, the vast open land became both his sanctuary and his prison. The ranch kept him busy, kept him from dwelling too long on his loss, but it also kept him isolated, alone with memories that sometimes felt too heavy to bear. This morning, like every morning, Jack was up before dawn to check on his cattle. The unexpected October snowfall meant he needed to ensure the younger calves were safe and warm. He drove his old Ford pickup along the property's eastern perimeter, where his land bordered the national forest. "Looks like we got about 4 inches," he muttered to himself, surveying the white landscape. The snow had transformed the familiar terrain into something almost magical, every tree branch outlined in crystalline white. Despite the beauty, Jack felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with the first snow of the season. Winter had been Lisa's favorite time of year. As he rounded a bend in the service road, something caught his eye, a thin wisp of smoke rising from deep within the tree line. Jack frowned. That area was part of the national forest, and there shouldn't be anyone out there, especially not in this weather. "Probably just some hikers got stranded," he said to his border collie Max, who sat attentively in the passenger seat. "Better check it out." Jack parked his truck as close to the tree line as possible and grabbed his emergency kit from behind the seat. "Come on, boy," he called to Max, and the dog leaped eagerly from the truck, ready for adventure. The snow made the hike more difficult than usual, and Jack was breathing heavily by the time he spotted the small hunter's cabin through the trees. He recognized it vaguely. It had been abandoned for at least a decade, ever since Old Man Peterson had passed away. As he approached, Jack heard something that made him stop in his tracks, the unmistakable cry of an infant. "What the hell?" he muttered, quickening his pace. Max ran ahead, pawing at the cabin door and whining. "Hello?" Jack called out, not wanting to startle whoever was inside. "Is anyone in there? Do you need help?" There was a moment of silence, then a woman's voice, weak but determined. "Who's there?" "My name's Jack Harmon. I own the ranch bordering this forest. I saw smoke and came to check if anyone needed help." After another pause, the door creaked open just enough for Jack to see a young woman's face, pale and exhausted, her dark hair matted with sweat despite the cold. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know this was private property. My car broke down yesterday, and Her explanation was interrupted by another cry from within the cabin. The woman's face crumpled, and she swayed slightly on her feet. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Jack asked, concern flooding through him. "You look like you're about to collapse." "I had my baby," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Last night. I don't know what to do. We can't stay here, but I don't think I can walk very far, and it's so cold. Jack's mind raced as he processed what she was saying. A woman had given birth alone in an abandoned cabin during the first snowfall of the season. The situation was more dire than he had imagined. "May I come in?" he asked gently. "I have some supplies that might help, and my truck isn't far. I can get you and your baby somewhere warm and safe." The woman hesitated, studying his face. Jack knew what she saw: a weathered rancher in his 40s, with a week's worth of stubble and work-worn hands. He tried to appear as non-threatening as possible. "I promise I just want to help," he added. "My name's Jack. What's yours?" "Sarah," she replied after a moment. "And this is Emma." She opened the door wider, revealing the tiny bundle cradled in her arm. Jack entered the cabin slowly, allowing Max to follow at his heels. The dog immediately went to Sarah, sniffing curiously at the bundle in her arms. "He won't hurt the baby," Jack assured her, seeing her tense. "Max is good with kids. Better than I am, actually." The ghost of a smile crossed Sarah's face, but it quickly faded as she sank onto the edge of the cot, clearly exhausted. The cabin was freezing despite the small fire Sarah had managed to build in the ancient wood stove. Jack immediately set about adding more wood, stoking the flames to generate more heat. "How long ago did you give birth?" he asked, trying to assess the situation. "A few hours," Sarah replied, gently rocking Emma, who had settled down. "Just before dawn." Jack nodded, impressed despite himself. This woman had incredible strength to have managed this on her own. "All right, here's what we're going to do," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "I'm going to help you and Emma get to my truck. My ranch house is about 20 minutes from here. It's warm, I've got food, and we can figure out next steps once you're both safe." Sarah looked up at him, and Jack could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. "Trust a stranger or remain in an increasingly dangerous situation. I don't have many options, do I?" she finally said. "Not really," Jack admitted. "That stove won't keep this place warm enough for a newborn, and you need rest and proper care yourself." Sarah nodded slowly. "Okay, thank you." Jack helped Sarah to her feet, noticing how she winced with the movement. He draped his heavy coat around her shoulders and fashioned a makeshift sling for Emma from a clean blanket in his emergency kit. Securing the baby against Sarah's chest, the walk back to the truck was slow and difficult. Jack supported most of Sarah's weight, alarmed by how she seemed to grow weaker with each step. Max trotted alongside them, occasionally looking up at the bundle against Sarah's chest with canine curiosity. "Almost there," Jack encouraged as his truck came into view. "You're doing great." By the time they reached the vehicle, Sarah was pale and shaking. Jack helped her into the passenger seat, cranked up the heat, and placed Max in the back. As they drove toward the ranch, Jack glanced over at Sarah, who was cradling Emma and struggling to keep her eyes open. "Stay with me," he said, reaching over to gently shake her arm. "Talk to me. Tell me how you ended up out here." Sarah's story came out in fragments: her escape from an abusive relationship, her desperate drive east with no destination in mind, the car breaking down, the unexpected early labor. Jack listened, anger building inside him at the man who had put Sarah in this position, and admiration growing for the woman who had endured so much to protect her child. "You're safe now," he said as they pulled up to his ranch house. "Both of you." Sarah looked over at him, her eyes filled with tears. "Why are you helping us?" Jack thought about Lisa, about the children they had planned to have before cancer stole their future. He thought about the emptiness of his house and his life these past 5 years. "Because it's the right thing to do," he answered simply. "And because nobody should have to face something like this alone." As he helped Sarah and Emma into his home, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. That somehow, in the midst of an early winter storm, his life had changed course as surely as Sarah's had. The warmth of Jack's ranch house enveloped Sarah like an embrace as she stepped through the door. After the frigid cabin, the heat almost made her dizzy. The interior was exactly what she would have expected from a bachelor rancher functional. Sparsely decorated, but clean and well-maintained. A large stone fireplace dominated the living room, and the worn leather furniture looked inviting and comfortable. "The guest room is this way," Jack said, guiding her down a short hallway. "It hasn't been used in a while, but the sheets are clean." The guest bedroom was simple but cozy, with a queen-sized bed, a pine dresser, and windows that looked out over snow-covered fields. Sarah sank gratefully onto the edge of the bed, still cradling Emma against her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. The enormity of her situation and Jack's kindness suddenly overwhelming her. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Jack shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to handle a crying woman. "I'll give you some privacy to get settled. There's a bathroom through that door. I'll find some clean towels." And double quotes he trailed off, then added, "Do you have anything for the baby? Diapers or ... Sarah shook her head, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I have a few things in my bag, but not much." I wasn't exactly prepared for this. Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. "My neighbor Helen has grandkids who visit sometimes. I'll give her a call, see if she can bring over some supplies." "I can't ask you to. You didn't ask," Jack interrupted. "Gently," I offered. "Rest now. I'll be back in a bit with some food and to check on you both." After Jack left, Sarah used the bathroom, wincing at the soreness that accompanied her movements. She washed her face and hands with warm water, then changed Emma's makeshift diaper using one of the few clean cloths she had packed. "What do you think, Emma?" she murmured to her daughter, who was awake now, dark blue eyes seeming to take in her new surroundings. "Is it okay to trust him?" Emma's only response was to wave a tiny fist in the air. Sarah smiled, feeling a rush of love so powerful it almost hurt. "You're right. We don't have much choice, and he seems kind." When Jack returned 30 minutes later, he carried a tray with soup, bread, and a glass of milk. "It's just canned soup," he apologized, setting the tray on the dresser. "I'm not much of a cook." "It smells wonderful," Sarah assured him, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. She hadn't eaten anything substantial since yesterday morning. As she ate, Jack hovered awkwardly in the doorway. "Helen's bringing over some baby things." She was excited. Apparently, she's been looking for an excuse to buy baby stuff since her daughter announced she's expecting. Sarah paused with the spoon halfway to her mouth. "Jack, I don't know how to thank you or how to repay you." Jack shook his head firmly. "Don't worry about that now. Focus on getting your strength back and taking care of that little one." "Emma," Sarah said softly. "Her name is Emma." "Emma," Jack repeated, a small smile warming his weathered features. "It's a beautiful name." There was a moment of silence, broken only by Emma's soft coos. Then Jack cleared his throat. "I should let you finish eating. Just call if you need anything. I'll be in the living room." After he left, Sarah finished her soup, fed Emma, and despite her intention to stay awake, found herself drifting off to sleep, the exhaustion of the past 24 hours finally catching up with her. She woke to the sound of voices in the living room, Jack's deep rumble and a woman's animated chatter. Carefully placing Emma in the center of the bed, surrounded by pillows, Sarah made her way to the door and peered into the hallway. In the living room, Jack stood beside a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a kind face. They were surrounded by shopping bags, and the woman was unpacking what appeared to be a mountain of baby supplies. "I got the basics," the woman was saying. "Diapers, wipes, a few onesies, bottles. Oh, and a bassinet. Every baby needs a proper place to sleep." "Helen, this is too much," Jack protested, but his neighbor waved him off. Nonsense. When you called and told me about that poor girl and her baby, what was I supposed to do? Bring 2 diapers and a pacifier? Besides, she added with a wink, most of this was on sale. Sarah stepped into the room, and both Jack and Helen turned to look at her. You must be Sarah, Helen said warmly, crossing the room to take Sarah's. Hands in hers. Jack told me what happened, you poor dear. How are you feeling? Better, thank you, Sarah replied, somewhat overwhelmed by Helen's enthusiastic greeting. I can't believe you bought all this. I don't know how to thank you. No thanks necessary, Helen assured her. Now where's that baby? Jack says she's a little beauty. She's sleeping, Sarah said, gesturing toward the bedroom. But I should check on her. Helen followed Sarah back to the bedroom, cooing in delight. When she saw Emma, oh, she's perfect. Look at those tiny fingers. How old is she? About 12 hours, Sarah replied with a small laugh. Helen's eyes widened. 12 hours, child? You should be in bed. Here, let me show you how to set up this bassinet, and then you're going back to rest while I fix you a proper meal. Over. The next few hours, Helen bustled around, setting up the bassinet, organizing baby supplies, and preparing a hearty meal in Jack's kitchen. Sarah watched in amazement as the older woman transformed the bachelor's home into a space that could accommodate a newborn. Helen's a force of nature, Jack commented when they had a moment alone. Has been since her husband died 10 years ago. Took over his hardware store and runs it better than he ever did. She's incredible, Sarah agreed. But Jack, I can't stay here. I'm imposing on your life, and you've already done so much. Jack's expression grew serious. Where would you go? You said your car broke down, you have no money, and no family to turn to. Besides, you just gave birth. You need time to recover. Sarah felt tears threatening again. I know, but no buts, Jack interrupted. You and Emma stay here until you're strong enough to figure out your next steps. The ranch is quiet this time of year anyway. I could use the company. That evening, after Helen had left with promises to return the next day, Sarah sat on Jack's couch, Emma sleeping peacefully. In her arms, Jack had built a fire in the fireplace, and the crackling flames cast a warm glow throughout the room. Max lay at Sarah's feet, having appointed himself guardian of the newest, smallest human in the house. Tell me about yourself, Sarah said, breaking the comfortable silence. You know most of my story, but I know almost nothing about you. Jack stared into the fire for a long moment before responding. Not much to tell. I was born on this ranch. Never wanted to be anywhere else. Married my high school sweetheart, Lisa. We had plans for a big family, but then she got sick. Cancer. She fought hard, but he trailed off, pain etching lines around his eyes. I'm so sorry, Sarah said softly. Jack nodded his acknowledgement. Been 5 years now. Just me and Max since then. The ranch keeps me busy enough. It's a beautiful place, Sarah offered. I can see why you love it. A small smile tugged at Jack's lips. It is. In the spring, when the wildflowers bloom across the north pasture, it's like something out of a painting. They talked late into the night, sharing pieces of their lives, finding unexpected common ground despite their different backgrounds. Sarah told him about her work as a nurse, her dreams of eventually opening a small clinic in an underserved community. Jack spoke of his love for the land, the satisfaction he found in the rhythms of ranch life, and his secret hobby of woodworking. As the fire burned down to embers, Sarah found herself thinking that for the first time in months, she felt safe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight, in this warm house with this kind man and his dog, she and Emma were okay. Thank you, she said as Jack walked her back to the guest room. Not just for the rescue, but for everything. Jack's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an understanding. A connection forged in the strange circumstances that had brought them together. Get some rest, he said softly. Tomorrow's a new day. As Sarah settled Emma in her new bassinet and climbed into bed, she realized that for the first time since learning she was pregnant, she was looking forward to tomorrow rather than dreading it. Whatever happened next, she wasn't alone anymore. 3 weeks passed in a gentle rhythm of caring for Emma, regaining strength, and settling into life at the ranch. Sarah was surprised at how quickly Jack's home began to feel like a sanctuary rather than a temporary shelter. Each day brought small but significant changes: Emma's increased alertness, Sarah's growing confidence as a mother, and the subtle shifts in her relationship with Jack. Jack had proven himself to be not just a rescuer, but a thoughtful companion. Despite his initial awkwardness around Emma, he had quickly developed a soft spot for the infant, often pausing his work to check on her or simply watch her sleep. Sarah caught him once, cradling Emma carefully while humming an old country song, unaware that Sarah had returned from her shower. The morning frost painted the windows with delicate patterns as Sarah prepared breakfast, Emma sleeping peacefully in her bassinet nearby. The routine they had established felt natural. Now Sarah handled the cooking while Jack took care of his early morning ranch duties. They would share breakfast before Jack continued his work, and Sarah would tend to Emma and help with indoor tasks as her strength returned. "Something smells good," Jack commented as he stamped snow from his boots at the door. Max bounded in ahead of him, shaking off and immediately going to check on Emma. "Just pancakes," Sarah replied, smiling as she flipped the last one onto the stack. "Nothing fancy." Jack hung his coat by the door and washed his hands at the kitchen sink. "Beats my usual breakfast of coffee and whatever I can find in the fridge." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Jack cleared his throat. "I checked on your car yesterday." Sarah looked up surprised. "You did?" asked Bill from the auto shop in town to take a look. "It's not good news, I'm afraid. The engine's shot. Bill says it would cost more to fix than the car's worth." Sarah set down her fork, a knot forming in her stomach. The car had been her last tangible connection to her old life, her only means of independence. Without it, her options for the future narrowed considerably. "I see," she said quietly. "Thank you for checking." Jack studied her face, his expression concerned. "What are you thinking?" Sarah hesitated, unsure how to articulate the tangle of emotions inside her. "I'm thinking that I need to figure out what comes next. I can't stay here indefinitely, imposing on your kindness." "You're not imposing," Jack said firmly. "Having you and Emma here, it's been good. The house hasn't felt this alive in years." The sincerity in his voice made Sarah's heart beat a little faster. Over these weeks, she had come to admire so much about this quiet, steady man: his gentleness with Emma, his dedication to his work, the way he listened when she spoke as if her words truly mattered. "Still," she said, "I need to think about the future. Emma deserves stability, a home of her own." Jack was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "The county hospital in town is looking for nurses. Helen mentioned it yesterday. Said they're offering good benefits, including housing assistance for the first year." Sarah stared at him, processing this information. "You think I should apply?" "I think you should consider it," Jack replied. "You said yourself you're a good nurse. The town could use someone with your skills. And," he added, his eyes meeting hers, "it would mean you and Emma could stay in the area." The implication hung in the air between them. Before Sarah could respond, Emma's cries came from the bassinet. She rose to tend to her daughter, grateful for the momentary reprieve from the intensity of the conversation. As she changed and fed Emma, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. A job at the local hospital would provide income and independence. She could find her own place eventually, build a life for herself and Emma in this small Montana community. And they would be near Jack. The thought surprised her with its appeal. In just 3 weeks, This gruff rancher had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. But was she ready to trust again? To build connections after Thomas had destroyed her faith in relationships? When she returned to the kitchen, Jack was washing the breakfast dishes, his back to her as he worked. "Would you drive me to town to look into that job?" she asked, her decision made. Jack turned, water dripping from his hands, a smile spreading across his face. "Absolutely. We can go this afternoon if you want." The small county hospital was a modest brick building on the edge of town. Inside, Sarah was surprised to find a well-equipped facility with a friendly staff eager to meet her. The nursing director, an efficient woman named Margaret, conducted an impromptu interview that quickly turned into a job offer when Sarah's experience and qualifications became clear. "We've been short-staffed for months," Margaret explained. "Having someone with your EIA experience would be a godsend. When can you start?" Sarah glanced at Jack, who waited patiently in the hallway with Emma. "I'll need a few weeks," she said. "My daughter is only 3 weeks old, and I'm still recovering from the birth." "Of course," Margaret agreed. "Take the time you need. The position will be waiting. And about the housing assistance, we have a small apartment above the clinic that's available immediately. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and furnished." As they drove back to the ranch, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had a job, the promise of her own place, the beginnings of a new life. "Thank you," she said to Jack as they pulled up to the ranch house. "For everything. I don't know what would have happened to Emma and me if you hadn't found us that day." Jack turned off the engine but made no move to get out of the truck. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "about you and Emma moving to town." Sarah waited, sensing there was more he wanted to say. "It makes sense," he continued. "You need your independence, your own space. But—" he paused, struggling to find the right words. "The thing is, these past weeks with you both here, it's like the house is alive again, like I'm alive again." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Jack, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know you've been through hell, and the last thing you need is some lonely rancher getting attached too fast. But I wanted you to know that there's another option. If you wanted to stay here, work at the hospital, but live at the ranch, you'd be welcome, both of you." The offer hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Sarah looked at Jack really, looked at him, and saw not just the man who had rescued her, but a partner, someone she could build a future with, slowly and carefully. "I think," she said carefully, "that Emma and I would like to stay, at least for now. We can see where things go from there." The relief and joy that spread across Jack's face told her everything she needed to know about his feelings. He reached across the seat and gently took her hand in his. "One day at a time," he said softly. "One day at a time," Sarah agreed. Later. That evening, as snow began to fall again outside the ranch house windows, Sarah stood watching Emma sleep in her bassinet. Jack approached quietly, standing beside her to gaze down at the peaceful infant. "She looks more like you every day," he observed. "Poor thing," Sarah joked, but her heart wasn't in the self-deprecation. She felt too content, too hopeful for that. "I was thinking," Jack said, his voice low so as not to wake Emma, "about the north pasture. How in spring it's covered in wildflowers. I'd like to show it to both of you when the time comes." Sarah looked up at him, understanding the promise in his words. "I'd like that too." Outside, the Montana winter wrapped the ranch in a blanket of white, while inside, warmth and the possibility of new beginnings filled every corner of the house. Sarah knew there would be challenges ahead her healing, building a new career, navigating whatever was growing between her and Jack, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't facing those challenges alone. As Jack's hand found hers again, Sarah thought about the strange winding path that had led her here, from fear and isolation in that cold forest cabin to this moment of connection and hope. Sometimes, she reflected, the darkest moments could lead to the brightest beginnings. Emma stirred in her sleep, a tiny hand reaching out from beneath her blanket. Sarah adjusted the covering, then turned to Jack with a smile. "I think we're going to be okay," she said softly. Jack's answering smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "I think so too."